How's it going, everybody? This is Steve Ninja. I've got Steve Herold here in the studio with me. Looks like he's gone off camera for some year, but we're so tonight.
Yeah, here I am live
So Steve's
before your naked steaming eyes. Hold on a minute. Let me just go plug my computer in real quick. Whoa.
so basically, Steve and I are both huge Van Halen fans, especially the Roth era Van Halen. But obviously, I've changed my name to Steve Ninja just to differentiate the two Steves.
Right. Oh, well, I changed my name to Steve Samurai.
Steve, there you go. We'll battle it out.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've changed my name to Steve. So I've got audio here, so we are officially live. So we had some problems. Well, I had some problems with my audio. Apparently, it was my fault, but I'll take all the blame.
That's cool.
Their settings, like the audio settings, like to turn off on us. But so this will be a lot of fun. I thought I like the Sammy Hagar era, the Van Hagar era, as a lot of people would say, but definitely the Van Halen changed when they went to Hagar, and part of that was maybe Eddie's doing in the band, but
yeah, I mean, people like I'm not a Sammy Hagar fan. I never was a Sammy Hagar fan before, during, or after. But I mean, unjustly, I think a lot of people, lay a lot of the blame on him for maybe the sound of the band changing a little bit and everything. And, I mean, Ed, like many people will point out, he was still the mastermind behind the music. You know what I mean? So this is the music he's giving to Hagar, and that's what Hagar's going to write lyrics to. You know what I mean? So, I mean, as much as I'm not a fan of Hagar's, you kind of gotta, I don't know that he deserves all the criticism of like making the band a little more, whatever you want to call it, compared to their years with Dave earlier,
Yeah, I mean,
and that's about all the nice things I'm gonna have to say.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Sammy came in as being a guitar player, so maybe I think Eddie. If you saw what happened in 1984, the 1984 album, they were going more synthesizer, and that's kind of what carried over to 5150, that whole thing. And so, and maybe Eddie didn't want to be the guitar god as much anymore.
Well, I mean, it's it's understandable. You play, I mean, I can't imagine any musician would not want to kind of stretch, their abilities and their talents, or just, do other things. I mean, it's understandable. You can't really give them anything for that. I mean, the only people who really stuck to their guns and remained the way they were from day one till pretty much the end were like the Ramones. And I love the Ramones, but that was Johnny Ramone. Johnny Ramone's like, he had no interest in changing the sound. He wanted to just, this is what we do. This is what, this is what our fans want to hear. That's all we're going to do, So, I mean, it's understandable that Ed would want to kind of try different things,
Yeah, I mean, I love the Ramones. I mean, Johnny Ramone played 3 chords, and it was very basic, but
sometimes he didn't even play them. They had somebody else in the studio doing it for him.
Yeah, he did. The Ramones, they did a lot of stuff in the studio too later on that were the production got bigger for a band that just has one
Ramones, guitar. A little bit.
Yeah,
but they were kind of still the Ramones till the end.
If you hear like 7 and 7 is that song is way bigger than their sound should have been, but
yeah,
they may have done stuff in the studio. But anyway, we'll get back to Van Halen though. It's obviously, but as far as this is the first time Steve and I have ever actually talked before. We've
so far it's going horribly.
Yeah. He loves like the Who. You like the Ramones. You like the Clash, don't you?
I like the Clash. My favorite punk band is probably Agent Orange. Okay. I got into them in like the mid '80s. They were in all the skateboard magazines, so I'd be reading about them. That's probably the first punk record I ever picked up, was an Agent Orange record.
Yeah, Van Halen was right in that punk era. They're in the disco era. They're fighting that whole thing, that kind of changing the sound.
There's a really interesting picture of Ed, Al, and Dave. There was a magazine back then in Southern California called Slash Magazine, and Slash became a record label, as you probably know. But it was a magazine, and there's a picture you can find online pretty easily of Ed, Al, and Dave kind of dressed up like punks, and
Yeah.
they're in like an alley. It's not, and Mike's not with them. It's just the three of them. And I've always wondered what the story was behind that photo, like why they did it, or how it ended up in Slash, or what have you.
Right.
And it's funny because I don't know if you know this. I went to at one of those book signings Alex Van Halen had.
Right.
I
Got to
met
meet
him last fall, and I was like, I it's not something that was on my mind, but like after the fact, I was like, oh yeah, I could have asked him about that photo. I could have brought that photo with me and been like, what's the story with this? Because I've never really seen anything written about like where anybody's mentioned like, oh, the reasoning behind that photo, like why it exists or whatever. But it's pretty interesting, and I've always wondered what the story was behind it. I'll find it and I'll send it to you so you can take a
Yeah.
look. If you've never seen it. It's kind of weird, but anyways,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, part of the reason why we got together tonight is that this is actually what the 47th anniversary of the Van Halen's debut
right.
album on February 10th. Yeah, there you go.
This came out before the album. This is the
Oh,
famous EP that came out before the record. It's got 5 songs on it. It's on red vinyl here. It's when I started collecting Van Halen stuff, this was one of the first things that I was able to pick up. I probably bought this in like the late 80s.
wow.
Um, but yeah, 47 years. Can you believe that? Fair
That's amazing.
Warning. Yeah, classic rock junkie. Fair Warning is a great album. That is many people's favorite Van Halen album.
Yeah, it's kind of like the AC/DC Power Age, kind of that album didn't have, the ton of hits on it, but that's why people love it so much, because the songs weren't destroyed, they weren't played so much, so you got sick of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
That's part of it, and that's kind of a raw album too.
Yeah,
And
I can remember buying that record. I bought that record. Well, Steve, let me ask you this. This is how would be a good way to kind of get into this. When did you get into Van Halen?
I didn't get into Van Halen until 1984.
Well, me too. I knew of them. I had an older brother. I don't know about yourself. I had an older brother, and um, he had like one or two of their albums. So I certainly was aware of them. I knew of them. I'd heard them, but and I remember being like I remember when Diver Down, when Pretty Woman came out. I mean, I can remember everybody in school loving that song, but I was a big Who fan at that time. I really hadn't really dug into Van Halen. They just, they were good, but I didn't think much of them beyond that. But I think what happened was I joined one of those record clubs,
Oh
and I
yeah,
got like the 12 cassettes for a penny or whatever, and
yep.
I got Diver Down. This was 1983 probably, and I got Diver Down just because it was such a big record in my school, and going through like picking 12, I just decided to grab that. Why not? Let me grab that. And I remember getting that box in the mail and taking Diver Down out. Maybe not first, but I remember when I got to Diver Down, putting in the cassette in, and it opens with Where Have All the Good Times Gone? And I just remember it just instantly grabbed me, man.
Yeah.
Like instantly I connected with that album, and a lot of it sounded like it felt like I'd heard that album before, and but it instantly clicked with me. And then later that year, when Jump hit radio and then video, I mean, I was all in. I mean, 1984 is the first album that I can remember like anticipating um coming out. Like the first record that I can remember being like, it's coming out this week. It's coming out. Like I couldn't wait to buy that record, and I bought it the week it came out. And Yeah, that's when I became a big fan. And then I started collecting stuff after that, imports, promos, all kinds of stuff. I've spent way too much money.
Yeah, you got
You've
a lot
seen
more
some of
stuff than
that crap.
Van
Yeah,
Halen I have. But
yeah,
yeah, I don't have any older siblings. I
right.
had uncles. I had uncles that loved the Van Halen debut and Van Halen 2. They got into that stuff, and that's what I'm. But it was really like the 1984, seeing those big hits from that
Yeah,
album, because I was
yeah.
only in 1984. I was only 11, so I turned 11 in like August of that year. So I was a young kid at the time. I didn't like it. If you don't have any older siblings to
Yeah,
get you into stuff, you're not going
yeah.
to know it. So I had to learn about the
Right.
Dave stuff.
My brother had moved on from Van Halen by the time he was into like U2 by the time 1984 came out. He wasn't really listening to that. So I kind of that was like my own, you know. But yeah, that's when I got in. That's when I really became a fan as well.
Yeah, so I've seen Van Halen 4 times in the concert. I've seen him twice with Sammy, 86 and 88, 5150 and the OE 812, which is the Monsters of Rock
Hmm.
tour. And then I saw him with Dave in 2007 and 2015. And like you said, we're talking about where have all the good times gone? Like it was years later that I realized that when I bought the Kinks, the Essential Kinks, and I discovered that's a cover of the Kinks
Yeah,
song,
yeah,
just a song they had on the debut. I'll mention later, but it's like I've mentioned that to people that have known Van Halen for years, and like, I said, did you know it's a Kinks cover? And he's like, really? I
yeah,
was like, they did two Kinks covers, and I thought, okay, and some
yeah.
people they always assume that's a Van Halen original, but
Well, I think the story is, and I might not be 100% correct. And classic rock again. I basically what you just said about Diver Down is something I'm going to mention myself as well later. But I think the thing with Van Halen, because everybody knows they were like a bar band, and I could swear, I'm not 100% sure, but I could swear that the Kinks thing sort of almost comes from like one of them had a like album of the Kinks with like 10 like a best of compilation of the Kinks, and they were just kind of like, let's learn these, we got to play 5 sets a night,
right,
and let's I mean, they're one of those bands, a bar band. They're one of those bands that had like this song book like of 200 songs that they knew how to play and that they could swap out and change up and what have you. So I mean, I think that's where the Kinks thing came from, of like, because I know I have bootlegs where I'm sure I had a bootleg where they played like all day, all night as well, that Kinks
right.
song. But
Yeah,
but
so
anyways, yeah.
they play whiskey a go go a lot, I think,
Yep.
and yeah, like you say, in bar bands, you're going to play covers all the time. They're not going to let you play originals a lot of times, until you're established a little bit. So yeah, you're going to play classic, rock, like 60s songs and stuff, and early
Yeah.
70s. That's
Yeah.
what you're going to play, and so
I was standing in the Whiskey A Go Go in 1996 when Van Halen, the Best of Volume 1 came out, and there was a big billboard right across the street, and the door for the bands to load in and unload was right, or not the I don't think it was where the bands loaded and unloaded, but the door, like an emergency exit or whatever, was right on the side of the stage uh, on Sunset. And I remember standing there watching a band, and somebody opened that door, and I'm aware, obviously, where I'm standing and what that my favorite band used to play here and stuff. And but I remember it was just one of those weird moments where I'm there at the whiskey, and I'd been there many times before. This wasn't the first time I'd been there, but it was just weird that like I'm standing there watching this thing, and somebody opens that door, and all this light comes in, and you look over, and like I'm staring at the giant Van Halen billboard right across the street, and it was just one of those weird moments where you're like, "Oh yeah, man," just imagine that's right there on that stage. There they were years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Alex Van Halen, like his peak time was 70s, 80s, and 90s. That was like in the 90s, even maybe in the late 90s, he had, I think, neck surgery. We see on the Van Halen 3,
Yeah,
if you've seen that Australian live
yeah,
concert with Gary Sharon, like he's wearing a neck brace. I think his
yeah. He was
playing,
in pretty bad shape.
yeah, I think his playing took a dive after the 90s. Because when I saw him in 2007, they weren't like,
Well, well, you want to know something? That's funny you bring that up because I remember the first show I saw their reunion thing with Dave in 2007. Honestly, I thought he was the highlight of the show for me.
right.
Alex was, and I
Alex
mean,
was,
I would have never in a million years expected that. But I remember walking out of there and being like, like kind of impressed with his drum solo and just his performance. Like as weird as it may sound. I mean, I would have never thought in a million years that's what I would take away from walking out of a Van Halen. Nothing against him. He's
right.
phenomenal, but you know, I mean, there's other things going on that you wouldn't think, like, the first thing you're thinking of, like, what was my favorite part of that show was Al, you know, but it
Well,
was.
Al, and back in the '80s, Al was like one of my favorite drummers. He was a top 10 drummer in any magazine I ever bought. I bought a lot of hard rock and metal, magazines, and Alex Van Halen was always in there, and he had this great drum kit
Yeah.
that was he was phenomenal.
You don't you do you play instruments, don't you?
I play
I don't.
bass, play
Oh,
bass
bass,
guitar. I
okay,
don't play drums, but
alright,
I know great drummers though, and he's one of those. He's in my top 10. I did like a video ranking my top 10 drummers, and Alex is in there.
right,
Uh, along with Neil Peart and obviously John Bonham, like the guys, those kind of bands. But he was up there with those kind of guys that just in the '80s the drum kits got huge. They play
yeah,
stadiums, so you have this huge the sound. But yeah, and I thought in 2015 when I saw him, I know I took my neighbor at the time lives across the street from me. His name was Scott. He's actually passed away now, but he made a comment about Alex. He didn't think his drumming sounded that good that night. Maybe it was just an off night, possibly, but
yeah,
that was later. And Eddie would pass away 5 years later too. So it
mhm,
could be just the whole band was just not on that night, possibly.
yeah,
But it was great to see Dave those 2 times. And
yeah, he was alright, you know, I mean, Dave's, you know, I mean, it sucks because like, people like ourselves, when you're fans of that, I mean, I saw Dave on the Eat 'em and Smile tour. I saw him many a time solo. So, I mean, I saw him performing at, you know, his quote unquote like peak, so to say. But I never got to see them with I never got to see him with Van Halen back then, the first go round. I almost did. I tried to go see them on the 1984 tour.
wow,
It's like my painful story. I They were playing at the Garden, and the Garden, if you're not familiar, like, you can take the train from the suburbs into the Garden. It's right above. It's right above the train station. So like, you don't even have to go onto the streets in New York. And we were young, like you said. I mean, I think we were 12 or 13, and weren't really allowed to go into New York City on our own,
yeah,
bunch of kids at 13-year-olds into our parents weren't gonna let us go into New York at night to go to a concert. But I remember finding like a scalper who was selling tickets for the show at the Garden, and I remember asking my mom, and it was one of those deals like, if your friends are all allowed to go, then you can go. And
wow,
one by one, each one of my friends were like, my parents won't
exactly,
let me, my parents won't let, so we couldn't go. I couldn't go, you know, so we didn't get to go. But of course, you know, at that time in, you know, spring of 1984, you know, we didn't know that the band was going to split up a year later, you know. So
didn't know that.
in hindsight, it's like, you know,
Yeah,
like, it bums me that I wasn't able to go to that show. I wish I would have been able to see them at their peak, you know, with all the original guys, you know.
right.
But
Yeah, because when I saw him again, it was Wolfgang Van Halen as it was the bass
yeah,
player. The next time I saw him, the next 2 times, the last 2 times I saw him, but and then, Wolfgang's a good musician, but he's not,
and
he's not
it's
original.
no, and it's understandable why. I mean, the only reason why any of that happened was because of him. I mean, he, you know, was the one who inspired his dad to even do that. I mean,
Right.
so like, you can say like, you know, how could they mess up the easiest part of not having Michael Anthony there? But it's kind of like, well, without Wolfgang there, I mean, that's the reason why Ed did it. Ed did not give a you know, did not care that if he didn't reunite with Dave or any of that stuff. It was all 100% about being playing on stage with his kid. So, you know, if his kid's not in the picture and it was just like somebody throwing a bunch of money at those four guys,
Yeah.
I don't know that any of that would have happened, because I don't think Ed had any real, you
Right.
know, and not there was no like desire to like, you know, do that. He needed his kids. So you can say that, but I mean, at the same time, you know, it was kind of a little bit of a bummer, because again, it was like the easiest part of the equation, you know, they weren't able to pull together, you know what I mean? Like Mike, if they asked Mike, he would have done it at a drop of a hat, you know, but it's
Well,
understandable why, you
yeah.
know, that
Well,
was the way it was. But
yeah. So they got back together with Hagar in 2004 with Michael Anthony at that point, and that didn't
right.
go well. That didn't, on
Yeah.
the hits
I didn't
collection. album. It didn't go that well on the best of
Yeah.
best of both worlds album. Greatest hits. It didn't go that well, so it's like so it was like 3 years later they got together with Wolfgang. So I think there's some bad blood there. Not wanting to pay Michael Anthony. It's just they didn't treat him.
I mean, there's plenty of drama in lots and lots of rock bands. They all have it. There's some where it's, more so than others, but I mean, no band has had more bull s drama, soap
Yeah,
opera crap than Van Halen. No band. There hasn't been one band in the history of rock music that has had more. I mean, it's like if you talk to anybody now, if you mentioned Van Halen, like if Van Halen, if Ed was still alive and Van Halen were going on tour this summer, the first thing out of just like the general public, somebody who doesn't pay attention or anything like that, the first thing out of their mouth would be like, "Well, who's in the band?" You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you know what I mean? It's just that's like the main thing when they think of that band. That's the first thing they think of. Maybe they think, "Oh, Ed was a great guitarist," but the first thing they think of is the infighting. You know what I
yeah,
mean? That's like their legend is soap opera shit. You know what I mean?
yeah. Because I mean, in '96 when they did that best of Volume One, they thought that Dave was back in the band. He actually recorded 2 songs on that album, on that hits album. Yeah, he actually recorded two songs on that, and they thought, "Oh, Dave's back." And then
Yeah.
the drama happened with Eddie's.
Dude, I was ready to go on tour. I remember talking with a friend of mine. We were ready to go like on tour, like Deadhead style,
Yeah,
if they did a tour. I can remember walking in. I was working at this place in Burbank, and there was always like the LA Times in the break room. And I remember in the morning going into the break room to get water or something, and the LA Times was sitting there on the table. And I remember flipping it open to the calendar section, and it was right like on the side of the calendar. They'd have like the little like headlines kind of thing. And the first one, there was a picture of Dave, and the headline said "Back in Van Halen." And I hadn't heard anything about this, and I mean,
right.
dude, I was like stunned, like in shock. I was just like, "What? I don't know what the hell I'm like. What am I really seeing this?" Like, I even went into my boss and I was like, and I told her, I said, "Look, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to concentrate at work today." Like I showed her like the paper and stuff, and she was cool. Like she's like, I get it, I get it.
Yeah, so
But yeah, man.
so you live in New Jersey now, but you went to a lot of concerts in New York, and then you lived in LA for how long did you
Yeah.
live there?
I don't know, in the '90s, a handful of years out there, yeah.
Well, yeah, I've been stuck in Indiana most of my life, well, all my life really. But so yeah, tonight, like I said, tonight we're gonna do a top 10. You said you're gonna mention some of your favorite like solo Dave
I'll
songs.
do them when you do your honorable mentions,
Okay, so
because
I
I
will
don't
wait.
have any honorable mentions, you do,
Okay,
so those will be my honorable mentions.
okay, so I will wait till we do our when you get to your number one, you can
Sure.
do those, and then I'll do my honorables
My and
before.
my list is gonna be weird. I mean, my list
Okay,
is gonna be weird because, I mean, I've been listening to these guys and been a fan of these guys for 40 years, and I mean, I don't listen to them that much anymore. A little bit here and there, but it's very rare that I'll listen to them. I mean, I couldn't tell you the last time I pulled one of their records. I think maybe last year because it was the anniversary of 1984. I may have pulled that
yeah,
off and listened to it, maybe, but I don't listen to them that much. So like a lot of my choices aren't going to be what you would expect.
well,
So there's a couple of them that probably aren't going to shock you or anything, but I'm sure a lot of them are going to be like, "Oh, didn't expect to see that." Starting with number 10. Do you want me to kick it off?
yeah, go ahead.
This record,
There you go.
my this is my favorite Van Halen record.
Really?
Like I mean, I love these first 6 albums equally, but like if I was gonna pull an album out to listen to, this is it. And classic rock kind of hinted at why. I mean, to me, this is a perfect encapsulation of the spirit of Van Halen.
Okay.
People say, covers, blah, blah, blah. That all came from Ed after they broke up. And he would say that in interviews and complain. Um, and then fans picked up on that sound bite. But
Right.
before that, nobody cared. There were covers. This was just the new Van Halen album. It was a great Van Halen record. It's a perfect summertime record. It's a fun record. It's the most fun record the band ever made, and
Right.
and all four members have their moment to shine on this record. They all have like their moment in the sun on this record, and I love it. I love this record. But my number 10, you're gonna fall off your chair when I say
Okay.
Big Bad Bill is Sweet William Now,
Well, okay.
featuring
Yeah.
their dad on clarinet. I love
Right.
that song. It's just a fun song to listen to. I don't know how you could listen to that song and not be in a good mood. It's
Right.
I mean, I can only imagine what it was like. Like that must have been a blast recording that in the studio. From what I understand, I think Mike played like the up. Well, you're a bass player. The what is it? Upright bass or whatever you
Right.
call it. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think that he played that, and they were just. I mean, it's such a fun song. I mean, I just love it. I mean, it's just it's just a blast. And Dave's like in his element,
Yeah.
and I don't care if it's a cover. It's great. You know what I mean? It's exactly what I want to hear. I mean, that's what I love about Van Halen. They do these covers.
Yeah.
They made them their own. And
Made
I
a
mean,
difference.
like I'll argue that Dancing in the Street on that album is the best version of Dancing in the Street,
Right.
you know?
City Woman, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
where, like I said, most people don't know unless you know the Kinks, you don't know where have
right.
all the good times gone. And I love the little guitars intro and little guitars. I think Eddie's
That might be coming up, man.
I mean, like Eddie's acoustic guitar playing for to me that shows like a really diverse kind of guitar player when you can play acoustic along with your electric and
Yeah,
he's a musician that like he wasn't just a guitar god even though he's a innovator. Eddie was a guy that brought something new and since Jimi Hendrix he brought something new, took equipment that he had and made it something special, and then he and someone was referring to like he's one of the first people to kind of decorate his guitar too, to have the different paint job and stuff on it. They're kind of a little bit different element. I got the
classic rock. Yes,
yeah.
I have that up on my wall, right up there. See it hanging
Oh,
over the window? That's the back cover of Diver Down.
oh okay. Yeah. Is that a live? Isn't it like a live?
Yeah, it's them opening for the Rolling Stones.
Oh
I
wow.
think it was shot at the picture was taken at the Tangerine Bowl in Florida.
Wow. Well, for my number 10, I actually had one that was one of their singles. So I didn't go too. I went predictable on some of them, but I didn't go all the hits. I didn't put all the. I put a couple of hits in my honorable mentions, but one that this is one I changed out, and I'll mention the song that I changed it out for. But number 10, like last night, I changed it to Romeo Delight, which is I love the how heavy that song is, and Eddie's playing on it is phenomenal. And I thought this one's not, it wasn't a single off of the
I think they opened a lot. I think it was like the concert opener for a long time, if I'm
yeah
remembering
when I
correctly.
mentioned it first. Yeah, when in 2007 when I saw them, hearing Eddie play. We went to this what's called the Conseco Field House, or I think it was Banker's Life at the time. It's where the Indiana Pacers play basketball, and hearing Eddie just kind of riff and stuff and tuning up, just hearing him in the back there, just said I couldn't believe that. Because I hadn't heard that in the Hagar era. I hadn't heard him play those classic songs. So the
Right,
songs
yeah.
because they didn't play a lot of those songs with Sammy Hagar.
They didn't play
They
any of them.
it's because Sammy's a different singer. He can't really do the Dave stuff, and Dave can't do his stuff either. It's just a different thing. And that's kind of what Gary Sharon came into the picture to they thought he would be the best of both worlds there, and he could sing both styles.
Yeah.
When I saw that Australian concert, I thought when he played the classic songs, the Hagar and Roth songs, it sounded great. And then they played those Van Halen 3 songs, and they
Yeah.
brought things down a little bit. I mean, there's some things that I like about Van Halen 3, but it's tolerable. It's not
There
something I
ain't
can listen.
nothing I like about it.
There's nothing here. But there's stuff I can tolerate. Like, there's always when I first heard that album, the first 6 songs, there's like 6 songs on it that I liked enough, but not songs I want to hear very often. It's like maybe once or twice a decade, I might be happy
Yeah.
to hear that stuff and like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I remember
Without
that.
You was in my mind, it's easily the best song on there, and it's and it's not even that great of a song.
Yeah.
It's decent, but it's easily the best thing on there. It's the most, I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, that problem with that album is Ed. That album showed that Ed needed either somebody like Dave or somebody like Hagar or somebody like Ted Temple or a strong producer
Right.
to kind of reel him in,
Yeah.
or to sort of make sense of all the stuff that he's coming up with. I mean, my feeling is Ed was probably just had one of those people who just had a million ideas in his head and would just
Yeah.
present this, platter of all this music, and then it was up to those guys to kind of try to form it into a song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Work, figure out the melody, what have you, and I think that Van Halen 3 and Gary Sharon was not up to that task
Right.
because, he was, I mean, you know, when Dave and Templeman certainly had a lot to do with it, but they were equals, and
Mhm.
when Hagar came into the picture, they were still equals. Hagar wasn't like the hired gun or a hired hand. They
Right.
treated him as an equal. He was coming in as an equal. When Gary Sharon came in, he was an employee.
Taking orders, yeah, from
Exactly,
Dave.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there was
Yep.
no way he was going to be like, you know, whatever. And I don't know. I'm not super familiar with his work out before the band or whatever, and so I don't really. I mean, I don't know that he, that was even his strength, anyways. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, no,
so.
I like Extreme. I like Nuno Bettencourt is a he's like an Eddie Van Halen. They
Yeah,
dedicated their last album to King Edward. They called it Eddie Van Halen. So Eddie
yeah,
Van Halen's a huge influence on Nuno. But
yeah.
yeah, Gary was younger than them too. It didn't fit. It just wasn't right. And he had those two great frontmen to follow them. It wasn't fair to him, really. He's
I
not
mean, it
going to
was
turn
just. I
around.
mean, there was just no way that was going to work.
No, it,
No
I mean,
matter who they brought in, it just wasn't going to work. You know what I mean?
right. All right.
But
So
that's a good one. That's a great song. I love that one.
yeah, awesome
All
song.
right, number 9 is not as bizarre as my number 10. This is from number 1, album number 1,
Yeah.
and this is I'm the One.
Okay. That's a great song too.
It's a good one. I love the breakdown in it. But yeah, just from that album, that's the first one that I think of. I mean, it's that album's full of all these kind of like classic songs that, remained in their set list till the end, but I'm thinking of something a little different than that. I'm thinking I'm the One. That's the one that I want to hear off of that album.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the deep cuts for sure of the original. I think it's a great album and obviously a great. It's my favorite debut of the '70s from any band. The best debut from the '70s. But number 9, I guess this was just coincidental that I picked this one. But this is actually from the same album, "Women and Children First." Like I said, the 9 through 1 I had on there before, and number 10 was one I added. But number 9, I've got "Everybody Wants Some."
That's a
So,
good one.
yeah, so the classics. Like I said, I did pick singles, some singles on this, but not all of them. I didn't leave.
And
I left lots.
there was only one single off of that album, and that was
Yeah,
"In the Cradle Will Rock,"
right.
which I can remember. That might be my introduction to the band. I may have heard "Running with the Devil" before that, but I can remember in 1980, my brother had "Women and Children First," and I can remember him calling me into his room, and he played me "And the Cradle Will Rock," and I remember him going like, listen to this part with the like, have you seen Junior's grades?
Yeah,
I can remember him like going like, listen to this, because he thought it was funny, and I can remember that to this day. I have a clear memory of that, and that might be my introduction to the band. It might be the first thing I ever heard from the band.
yeah. So
That might be the moment that I was
yeah,
introduced to the band, but it didn't like, make me run. It didn't make me run out and become a Van Halen fan or anything. But I remember that very
because you're so
clearly.
young. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so early. That's 1980. So
yeah,
I was 7 in 1980. So yeah,
yeah.
you hear this great music coming from your brother's room. How much older is your brother?
Like maybe a year and a half or so, year and a half or 2 years.
But
Yeah.
he
Yeah,
had
he
more.
was young. He was young, but like that was when I wasn't really into music, buying music so much yet, but I maybe was on the cusp of that. But that was the age he was when you start buying music and all that
Mhm.
stuff, So, and that was the brand new album, and so
Wow.
that's what he had.
Did you ever steal or borrow any of his music and take it into your room and check it out, or just
I would go into his room and like record, like make a mix cassette when I
yeah?
had to find, like, 'cause I had cassettes originally.
Uh-huh.
So I would make, cassettes to listen to. I'd go in there and record stuff, whatever albums he had, make like a mixtape for myself or whatever.
Wow. Yep. That's I wish I had that too. Like I had to discover all this stuff on my own, just like he did. He had
Yeah, yeah.
discovered
Right.
it, but he got to pass it on to his younger brother, and kind of, and that's you're so close in age, so you were kind of like good friends there, just in being family members, and
Nah, we weren't good friends. No, we weren't.
he was teaching you stuff there and you were
Yeah, I mean,
that age.
at that age, a little bit, when we got a little bit older, he wasn't so much, but at that
You're
moment,
like a
we were
sponge.
still young.
Your brother,
Yeah.
like your older brother, is into stuff, and you're gonna be
Yeah,
listening.
I mean, my guess is like when he did that, when he played that for me, called me in to play that for me. My guess is he probably had just gotten that record and
Mhm.
just thought it was so funny that that was happening in a song. Like, have you seen Junior's grades? And called me in just to like, hey, check this out. You know what I mean? But yeah, but but speaking of which, my number 8
Mhm.
is from Women and Children First Two, and this is my brother's copy.
Oh, wow.
I inherited it from him. This is the copy that he bought. This is the one that he played and the Cradle Will Rock for me. I inherited it from him years later. And the tune that I'm picking, again, another one out of left field, is "Could This Be Magic?"
Oh, yeah. That's a great song.
I love that song. And
Yep.
again, it's like I think like you'll see with my list, it's kind of like a lot, not all of it, but a lot of it is like I think what I gravitate towards these days with Van Halen are like those more off
Right.
kilter songs, not like
Right.
what you expect from them.
Right.
And that's
Yeah, that's
why
it.
Big Bad Bill, and that's why Could This Be Magic? I mean, I always liked Could This Be Magic, but
Yeah.
it's this weird type of song in the middle of a lot of this hard rock and stuff. But I always loved that song. I love those guys playing. I believe it's Dave and Ed both playing together guitar. And
Yeah. Kinda like
yeah, and
acapella kind of. Yeah.
I just love the lyrics and just the whole vibe of that song. I just love it. I always have.
He's
That's
a
number 8. Yes, my copy does have the poster.
oh, he has those are awesome.
Yeah. I actually even bought, I wish I had, I don't have all my CDs here. I bought the Japan um uh reissue that they put out, like the mini LP one,
Hmm.
and that actually has a mini version of the poster in it. Like they really did those mini CD LPs in Japan. Like they really did a good job of them because it has the a mini version of the poster inside, which is so bizarre. But yeah, mine has a copy. I mean, that was bought in 1980. They were still, I think now if you buy the reissues, it has the poster again, which is surprising because you wouldn't think Warner Brothers would go to the trouble of printing up those posters now in this day and age.
Well,
But
as much as they sell for they charge for vinyl now, it's like they should throw some extra stuff.
I know, but it just seems like, you're like Warner Brothers, you'd think that they would just be like, just put a white sleeve in there and call it a day. Like they're not going to go that extra mile to put a poster in there. But I for some reason, I think that they have been putting them in the reissues. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's my number 8. Could This Be Magic?
Yeah, so, I'm going to their big album here, I guess the pop album, I guess, 1 of 2 off of, 1984.
This is what, number 8 for you,
This is
right?
number 8 for
Yeah.
me,
Okay. Okay.
this song is "I'll Wait." It's one I've never gotten tired of. I know what you mean. You hear these great songs.
I know, I agree with you on I'll Wait. I think I'll Wait's it's a good, it's a great pop, like 80s, mid 80s pop
Yeah.
synth-driven
Oh,
tune.
synthesizer.
I think it's on that really not that good live record they put out with Dave, the Tokyo
Yeah,
Dome
yeah.
one. I think "I'll Wait's" the best song on there as far as, like, performance, all everybody like, the band's really good, Dave's off, like, back and forth. Sometimes he's
Well,
okay, sometimes
right.
he's not, but he's pretty good on "I'll Wait." Like, I think "I'll Wait's" like the best track on that live Tokyo Dome record where everybody is, where Dave is good, you know?
That's where
Anyway,
Sammy Hagar said, "Oh, come on the vocals." He's criticizing them for the vocals on it, and
yeah,
yeah, and some of the
they're
vocals
not
are
good.
weird on that. It sounds kinda odd, but I've talked about this with, I think it was the US festival, when I didn't realize that Eddie and Michael Anthony both played synthesizer during that song. Like, I never knew that Michael Anthony ever played
Yeah,
synthesizer.
he used to back in, like, earlier than that, I've seen pictures, I don't know if I've seen video, but I've seen pictures. He used to have a keyboard that was in, like, a bomb. It was,
Wow.
like, in a bomb, um, case or whatever. Like, it was like, like, it looked like a movie prop,
Oh,
like a big like, if it looked like some giant bomb that came out of, like, an airplane.
mhm.
Like, he had his synthesizer was, like, in one of those or whatever. You can see pictures of it, but, yeah, I don't know when I first saw that, but, I mean, I saw it probably a long time ago, but in the '80s, I don't think I was aware of that, you know what I mean? I think it was, like, when I started really collecting stuff late '80s, early '90s when I probably saw a picture in a book or a magazine or something of that. Yeah.
Yes, I'll Wait was like a song that didn't get a video. It was one you heard on the radio a lot, but it wasn't one of
It
the
was a pretty
video.
big hit. I mean, I think it
It
went to, like, number 13.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, it
like
would have been interesting to see if what they would have come up with for a video for that. I think it was like that came out as a single right when the tour started, so, that probably was the reason why they didn't do a video for it, but that would have been it's a shame that there's no video for that because I can imagine they could have come up with something pretty cool with for that.
yes, I mean, so people will accept that song, but then Eddie would go more into synthesizer on the next album and
Yeah.
do that, and especially Oh Yeah.
I never had a big problem with that. I mean, some of the more like I never had a problem with like when "Why Can't This Be Love" didn't really bother me. It felt like an extension of "Jump" in a way. But
Right.
but I think like this like "Love Walks In" or what was that one on
Summer
OU812?
Nights.
When it's love, like those ballady ones,
Yeah.
those just kind of seem kind of generic to me in a way. I mean, that's what all those bands were like, all those like hair metal bands were doing those, and so like theirs kind of just sounded like a better version of one of those, you know what I mean? But
This is really heavy on synthesizer.
yeah.
So, like, the fans
Honestly, those Hagar ones, for me, they start it's like diminishing returns. I think
right.
if I had to put them in order, I'd put them in order of favorite to least favorite in the exact way that they came out.
Well,
Um,
yeah, the Poor Unlawful Carnal Knowledge is what the official title of the album, but
yeah.
some people love Balance, and I think it's one of the
I
weakest
don't
albums.
Yeah,
That's when
I
the
just didn't
band's
really.
breaking up and they're hating each other. Uh,
Yeah, and that's what it sounds like. It sounds like a band that's kinda tired of each
oh, yeah,
other.
yeah,
So my number 7 is from 1984 as well. This is my original copy that I bought
yeah.
in January of 1984.
Uh-oh.
My choice is Top Jimmy.
Top Jimmy, okay.
I love Top
Moving
Jimmy.
on.
I loved
I
it
love the
back
deep cuts
then.
in this album. The deep
Huh?
cuts are phenomenal. The deep cuts are really great in this album. With that, House of Pain was a
Yeah,
song that
I almost chose Girl Gone Bad because I really
Girls on
like
Bad's
Girl
a good
Gone
one
Bad.
too. Yeah,
Drop Dead Legs is really good too. But yeah, I love Top Jimmy. Again, it's just a fun song. It's a blast. It's about like this old, uh, band, the Top Jimmy and the Rhythm Pigs, who were in the whole Southern California scene with X and all those guys that I love. And yeah, I remember seeing in a book, there's a book about like Southern California punk, and I remember back in the '90s, I was in like a Virgin Megastore, and I was flipping through the book, and all of a sudden there was this picture in there of Dave on like it wasn't even a stage; it was like they were just on the floor, like but he was singing with Top Jimmy, and I'd
yeah.
never seen that before. I was like, "What is this, man?" But yeah, I mean, I remember back then in the '80s, I don't even remember, it probably wasn't until, like, the '90s or something, I didn't even know that they said in the song, "Top Jimmy and his Rhythm Pigs." I never knew what
Yeah.
the hell that that
I
they were
never picked up
saying.
on that either. I
Yeah,
mean,
I didn't know that till a handful of years later, and then it was sort of like, what is that, you know? And at some point, I read somewhere that it was about this punk band or whatever, and I was like, oh no, shoot. They were more of like a blues band though, but
well, I mean, the last track, House of Pain, I think it's that's one that it was before the debut album that they were
yeah,
playing on the the Gene Simmons, whatever the demo that they did. So that's I can understand that the deep cuts.
right
The,
here, the
oh yeah,
bootleg zero
Zero. Yeah, I've
demo.
heard about the Zero demos. I never heard that before, but I've heard somebody just talk about that recently. But yeah, I understand the deep cuts, man. Whenever you get into stuff you've heard so many times, the deep cuts are the ones that never get old because they weren't the ones that were played to death on the radio and
Yeah,
videos on stuff. But now see, my number seven, it's a song I've loved from Van Halen too. It's a Light of the Sky. Love that. I
yeah,
think
that's a good
Ingrid
one.
Malmsteen did a cover of this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think back in the '90s.
Oh, yeah,
He was a huge Eddie Van Halen fan. Eddie Van Halen like influenced so many of these great guitar players that came after him too. That these shredders. Eddie was like a shredder back in those earlier
yeah,
years, and he even though he kind of maybe that's part of the reason why he stopped kind of playing that way. Maybe he didn't want to be known as a shredder or being that like a metal guy necessarily. Even though a lot of Van Halen songs are really heavy and metal fans really love their songs, but Light of the Sky is just a phenomenal off of this. And I had another song off of Van Halen 2 also that I replaced with Romeo Delight. But yeah, Light of the Sky is to me it's one
yeah,
of those epic songs from them.
yeah. I mean, I remember in 1984 is when I became a big fan. I had Diver Down on cassette, then I ran out and bought that 1984 when it came out on vinyl, and then I became a huge fan. So in 1984, I'm starting to buy all their old records,
Right.
and I can remember like you know getting to hear some of that stuff for the first time. You know what I mean? Like Van Halen 2, or like, there were some of those records like, that I'd never even you know, um Women and Children First or something like that, where like I listened to And the Cradle Will Rock and never continued the album. And then like some point in 1984, I was like, well, let me flip this over and see what the other songs are
More,
like,
you have some good stuff on here.
Yeah, I mean it's weird, but yeah, it was just
I
this
like
just
stuff.
like I mean, I have little bits of memories of that time, but I mean I can remember it was just kind of like, by the time like 1980, by the time the band split up, like by then I kind of I'd heard most of the records, and I just like was just blown away. I mean, there's so many tracks, man. Like that's a perfect example of one. But my number, what do we at? Number six is kind of like that. What I was just talking about. It was like one of those things that I hadn't heard ever, the song, and suddenly I heard it, and I've been a fan of it ever since. And I should have mentioned, like this list that I made, this top 10 list. It's I mean, these are 10 of my favorite songs.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily say like this is definitively
best.
number six. Yeah,
Right. These are your
But
favorites.
yeah,
Right.
but number six from Women and Children First is In a Simple Rhyme,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
which I mean I can remember hearing that song for the first time, and
Mm.
it just was crazy because it was like nothing I'd ever like. That to me is sort of like In a Simple Rhyme um is kind of like a song that like Van Halen, they never really kind of did that again. Like
Mhm.
this kind of long, like it's this one of these kind, like I don't know if, like, I'm not a musician. I don't know if you'd call it like a suite, but you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It feels like it's one of those things where it's like three or four songs, kind of like the song kind of goes, it starts off this way and then it becomes slows down and becomes this other thing and then
Yeah.
it goes in, you know what I mean? And they never really, I don't know that they ever really did that again, and it was kind of unique or whatever. And it would have been interesting to see them, maybe develop some of that a little bit more or whatever, or try that again or whatever. But it's kind of like unique to itself. Like I said, I don't know that there's anything quite like that in their catalog. I
Yeah,
don't know if
it
they did
could
something
be
like
like
that.
progressive rock, sort of like their
Yeah,
attempt at
yeah, right, yeah, sure,
progressive. And it's like the second longest song on the album too,
yeah,
because Everybody Wants Some is 5:05. A lot of their albums are so short; they're like 30
yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
That's kind of like the punk world where you do
yeah.
30-minute album, get in
Yeah,
and get out.
or, I mean, a lot of that, I think, was also like the old kinda like Motown or the old
Yeah,
rock and roll days of, like, 2 minutes, 30 seconds or whatever.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, late early until like the early '60s. A lot of songs were like 2 minutes long, two
yeah,
and a half
yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, and they played so fast too. It's like when
I
you
mean,
play
that's yeah, I mean, that's kinda the influence, I think, of Ted Templeman and probably where Dave's kind of real love laid. I don't know that the brothers were that like that, but I think Dave obviously probably had a lot of my guess is Dave had a lot of 45s in his
yeah,
record collection, you know what I mean?
right. So
All right, number 6.
my number six is I guess it's another one of the hit songs from their debut album. It's Jamie's Crying. That song's never gotten old for me. It's like that's why a lot of these songs, even though they are really popular songs, that song's never gotten tired, never gotten old for me. Like this debut album's never gotten old.
Yeah,
You,
that's a good
you
one.
got some of the deep cuts off of it, but that's a song I've never gotten tired of.
Yeah, that's a good one. If
Yeah,
we made this list in 1992, that probably
yeah.
would have been on my list for me.
Like you said, you've those deep cuts are the ones that you've gone to now because you've heard some of those other songs so many times. I get
Yeah,
that too.
yeah. No,
They
that's
get
a
every
good
once
one.
in a while, and you want to preserve those great songs. You don't want to just hear them over and over because they stop being great if you wear them out or you get
Yeah,
tired of hearing them. You know,
yeah. We've all heard "Ain't Talking About Love" enough times in our life.
mm,
My number 5 is from Van Halen 2, and this is
oh
my from my collection, the Steve Archives.
yeah,
This is my 45 picture disc of "Dance the Night Away,"
okay, yeah, that's a good song.
and I have to include this one. Like, this is, obviously one of those tunes we've all heard a million times. 5 seconds ago, I was saying we've all heard "Ain't Talking About Love" enough. We've all heard "Dance the Night Away" enough, but I don't know, for some reason, that song, I just always loved that, and there's no way in hell I could make a list like this and not include it because that was such, like, a key one. Like, me and my friend Gary, who's a huge Van Halen fan as well, like, I mean, that was our tune, like, that we would always play. We were at parties or something, and somebody put that on, like, me and him would become Van Halen,
Yeah,
for a couple of minutes, and we would, everybody be cracking up at our antics and stuff. But yeah,
I,
that one holds a special place for me. So there's no way in hell I could leave that one off the list.
well, I love that opening riff that Eddie's. It's really simple. It's not really heavy, but it's memorable.
Yeah,
The riff he does in the beginning of the song,
yeah,
and it plays throughout the song. Eddie always played that too whenever he showcased his newer guitars that he made. Eddie made these guitars and sold his guitars and his amps,
right.
all this stuff. So he allowed people to play like him. Like he that's probably why Wolfgang is so well off now because his dad sold this music to people that wanted to play like Eddie, and a lot of people can play like Eddie now because he gave them the equipment to make it
Yeah,
possible for them to play that way. So
right.
yeah, that's a great song too.
Hmm.
Um, and number 5 for me, we mentioned this from. I'm going to this album a lot. Women and Children first. I've got "And the Cradle or Rock." Like that song. That song's never got tired. It never gotten old for me. It's the classic song that it's 3 minutes 31 seconds. And the Cradle or Rock. I just love that. It's the ting, 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 that Eddie's playing that part with there. He said that song never gets old for me either. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I already talked about that one. Like I said, I feel like that's probably the first thing I ever heard from the band, and yeah, it's a great one for sure, no question. One of the classics.
yep.
All right, so where are we at? Number 4. I mean, it's funny because we haven't had any
Yeah.
overlap yet, but I feel like maybe this one we might overlap on, or not overlap, but I have a feeling this might be on your list.
Right.
Um, I remember buying this record again. I may have picked this up, like I said, after 1984, and I was decided like I got to go buy some of their other records. This might be the first thing that I picked up after that, and it might be, but regardless, I remember buying this. I remember bringing it home and putting it on and listening and hearing the first song, and just was just blown away, man. And it's still one of the greatest Van Halen songs of all time, and that is from Fair Warning, and that is Mean Street.
Well, great song. Yeah.
And that song is just killer. And I have somewhere on my collection, I have the original Voodoo Queen, which is kind of interesting, but it's Mean Street. It's obvious that that song needed to be Mean Street. It's a good thing that they kind of shelved it early on and came back to it later and improved upon it, because Mean Street is, by far a lot more interesting than Voodoo Queen. But that song, yeah, I mean, it's just I like I said, I can remember just hearing that for the first time and just being like, "Holy crap, man!" Like it was like I'm a big Van Halen fan off of 1984 and Diver Down, and then I put on Mean Street, and it's like, yeah, I made the right decision, man. You know what I mean?
I love that riff in that song too. Dan, 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 the whole thing.
Yeah, I had a feeling classic rock was going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one, man.
Yeah, I mean, he loves the Fair Warning, so yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah,
one of the
yeah,
really great songs on the album.
yeah. It's a great one. It's classic.
Yeah, so my number
Number
4. So
four, right?
this is my second of the two songs from 1984. So I didn't pick the two other big hits. I just picked two. But I've got Panama on this, which to me that's never old for me either. I love
Really?
the little breakdown he does. That
Yeah.
that little slow kind of breaks down.
I feel like Panama, out of all their songs, is probably the one that has been like played to death. Like it
Yeah,
seems like, I mean, they just had the Super Bowl commercial with the song,
right.
and
You mentioned
like
that Glenn Powell.
anytime, like I feel like these days, like if anybody ever is going to use Van Halen in a movie or anything like that, it's always Panama,
Well,
and
it used to be Jump though. Jump was a song, and they finished all their shows with
yeah,
you know.
but well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, I don't know, like I mean, yeah, but yeah, but Panama has become that song. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
If somebody tomorrow was like, "Hey, we want to put a Van Halen song in this movie or whatever," it seems like Panama is always the one. Like, so Panama, I don't think I was a handful of years ago, but I feel like now I've kind of getting into that territory where I'm like, all right, I don't know that I
yeah.
need to hear
Yeah, but
Panama
I
again.
put this together on Saturday night, and I actually put a note here last night on the Super Bowl. I said Ram commercial with Glenn Powell, the
Yeah,
Hangman from Top Gun Maverick. He plays that song in the so I made sure I made a note of that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
only had this on my list before I decided,
You
but I
don't
love
even have
that
to
song.
watch the Super Bowl anymore to see all the commercials, man.
Yeah,
Everybody wants I
that's
never cared about the commercials all that much, but it's funny to me now that they release them like weeks
yeah,
beforehand. It's like,
they're coming. Yeah, they're not a
yeah,
big surprise like they
kind
used
of
to be.
goofy. So all right, number three for me, we're going back. I'll let you hold up the records. I already held it up. Number three, we're going back to Diver Down.
Oh, I don't have
And oh,
that.
you don't?
You got the vinyl.
I got it. Diver Down.
Yeah.
Um, and Secrets.
Oh yeah.
Secrets, again, going back to like, could this be magic or whatever? It was sort of like, a left turn, so to say, for Van Halen. It's not what you'd expect them to do. And it's a
Right.
great song. I mean, the lyrics are awesome, and the music is great. And again, it's just like, this chill kind of tune. And again, it was sort of like something you wouldn't really expect from them. And that's what I kind of like. I mean, that's what I like about Diver Down in general. It's just the album is so like varied, there's a little bit of like everything in there, and
Yes.
it's such a great record, and I mean, it's such a bummer that people give it a bad rap, because it's a
Yeah, that's
fun
one of the
record and everything, but and they also forget that it's like, you know okay, there's all these covers or whatever, but they sort of made it their own or whatever. But it was also, the label, you know, forced them to make it, like the label's like, hey, pretty, like they put out Pretty Women thinking like this will give us some time to get away for a while. We just did a tour for a year and a half. This put out a single so people don't forget us and it gives us some breathing room. Then the thing becomes a hit and it's like the label's like, make us an album. We want an album ASAP. You guys have made all those other albums in 2 weeks. Make us another one, So I mean, they weren't ready and they just kind of ran in there. So it's like, all right, let's go back to what we know. We're a bar band. We know how to play these tunes. Let's do them,
Yeah,
and whatever. But that's what I like about it. It's very like varied. There's a little bit of like everything on that album. There's some hard, heavy stuff, and then there's some poppy whatever stuff. But yeah, I love Secrets.
yeah.
It honestly, it could have easily been my number one selection.
Well, yeah, that's the third single from the album. It's one of the originals on it that the Van Halen,
Yeah.
Eddie,
I
Alex.
have the single, and I think the single has like there's like a different. The 45 has like a different version on it. Like, I mean, I think it's like I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if there's something unusual about the 45 for Secrets. I can't remember what it is anymore, but
Yeah, so I mean, Diver Down went 4 times platinum, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I mean, the next album was like the Juggernaut,
yeah,
solo out in the next Juggernaut album from them. So number 3 for me, I'm going to this album, Fair Warning, and the song is Unchained. It's like
right.
Unchained is another one. It's like it's really a very simple song.
Yep.
Van Halen, not a lot of lyrics in it. It's very basic, but that guitar riff in it is what really sells that song for me. And
Yeah.
it's another one that's never gotten old for me either. But
I think
I'm
a
sure
lot of people would, if somebody had no idea who Van Halen was and were like, "Who's Van Halen? Give me an example or play me something." I think I think a lot of people that be the thing that they would play them. It's like, here's a perfect example of this is why this band meant something. You know what I mean? I
yeah,
think that you'd find a lot of people say like that'd be the perfect thing to play for somebody who'd never heard of this band before.
yeah, it's just a basic riff, just kind of repeats over and over, and it's what 3 minutes and three 3 minutes 27 seconds, really short.
Yeah, the on YouTube there's that concert. I think it's from Montreal from the 1984 tour because they opened with Unchained on that tour. And I mean, dude, man, you like watch that Unchained or like you watch that concert, the beginning of that concert, and then they start playing Unchained. Like the spot is down on Eddie playing, and then Dave does his jump. I mean, that thing you want to talk about like goosebumps, man. I mean, like that you see that, and it's just like, man, like I would have killed to have been able to see that live. Just
Yeah, I mean
that show, man.
the video's live. That's what MTV. That's what.
Yeah, but you got it like it's the 1984 tour, like somebody just shot it from the audience, like the opening of the concert, and it's Unchained. It's like it's better than the video that they put out that was on MTV and everything because it's just like you just feel that energy of just you know what I mean? Like they are like ready to go, and it's just like boom, and the lights just come up and I mean, it's. I remember seeing that a couple of years ago and watching it and just being like, damn, like maybe at a time where I was starting to doubt how great the band was, and I saw that, and it was just like, oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
Was that their first video? I know they did one for Pretty Woman on the next
Now, well, I
album.
mean, there were video. I mean, it was pre MTV, but there's videos for they shot them at the Whiskey. They shot Running with the
Almost.
Devil.
Yeah.
They shot Running with the Devil. They shot. I think there's three of them. Running with the Devil, maybe Ain't Talking About Love, and there might be one other one that they shot at the Whiskey on the stage. They all look the same. It's just
Yeah.
whatever.
Before MTV, they made promo videos, but they weren't made for
Yeah, I
MTV.
think sometimes they got played in like I think maybe bars would play them or something like that or whatever. But yeah, but there are. I'm pretty sure they made three of them. But there was like a video for You're No Good. Again, they're all like performance things. There's one for Dance. I'm sure you've seen the Dance the Night Away one.
Right. Okay.
Um,
So that
but
was
yeah, there were a few, and there's that weird one for Loss of Control but I think it ended up that they said that was actually for a TV show. There was a
Wow.
weird one for Loss of Control from Women and Children First, where they're like dressed up like surgeons,
Yeah. Sounds
and
familiar.
I think somebody at some point discovered that was actually made for like a TV show or
Wow.
something, like in Europe. But anyway, so number 2 for me is Back to Diver Down Again,
Uh-oh.
and it's Little Guitars. You mentioned
There
it
we go.
earlier. You mentioned it earlier. I love Little Guitars, man.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's a great song. I love that song. I mean, it's
Yeah,
yeah,
I thought you would combine those 2 songs together. That's why I said, like, if you want the intro, put the intro and
yeah.
the song following.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's whatever. But Secrets and Little Guitars, those 2, like, there's a reason I picked number 1 to be number 1. I sort of have to, I think. But Secrets and Little Guitars, in reality, if I really was making a list of like and ranking these things, Little Guitars and Secrets would be 1 and 2, and I could flip them around and I'd be fine either way. But I love both of those songs. But yeah, Little Guitars is just amazing. And I always loved the live version of that better, where they kind of extend it at the end
Oh,
and they kind of repeat the ooh, like, and Dave and Mike would do this thing, and Ed would like running back, and all of them, they're all running back and forth and sliding across the stage, and yeah, it was just awesome. I like, to the point where I was almost like, when you hear the live version of that back in the day, um, like I almost was like, wish the studio version was longer, like had that extended part in the studio version. But
a
anyways,
lot
that's number 2 for me.
a lot of bands are better live than their albums are more basic, and then they do something live, and it's
Yeah.
just, well, they're wide open and loose. So number 2 for me, going back to the debut, the last time I have a debut song on here, this is one I combine, obviously,
I can't
with
believe that we did not pick
yeah,
any, and because I know our number ones are not going to be the same. I can't
no.
believe that our that we didn't pick anything the
Well,
same.
that's
And
good though.
yeah, yeah, I'm
You don't wanna,
surprised.
yeah, you don't wanna talk about the same songs, have 2 people
Yeah,
do a top 10 and talk about the
yeah,
same songs, because you wanna celebrate this band in the Roth era, and they have, 6 albums to go by, so but, for me, I combined, number 2, I cheated, Eruption, and You Really Got Me.
all right.
That's like, obviously, Running with the Devil is the first song off this, but that's when, to me, that's when Eddie Van Halen became this legend. When people heard that solo for Eruption, and then skips over to the Kinks cover of You Really Got Me. That's the only cover I have on this, but to me, that's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Those, like, I remember like when I would make my own little cassette best of Van Halen tapes to play in the car. Yeah, you'd always put the 2 of them together. You wouldn't break them up. They almost felt like they needed to go together. Um, but and I think even like I don't know about where you are, but like radio stations, or when I was growing
yeah,
up, I feel like they always played those. If they were going to play "You Really Got Me" on the radio, they played it with Eruption.
yeah.
Um,
It's like Queen. We are the champions. We will rock you. We are the champions. Like you're disappointed if you want to hear the 2 songs back to back. Anytime
yeah,
those songs, you hear anything like that, where the 2 songs are, people are
yeah,
known for hearing 2 songs together, you're disappointed if you don't hear them together. So
yeah, yeah. Nah, that's a good one. Obviously. All right. So, oh well, now we're going to do our honor before number
almost,
1. That was your number 2, right?
that's
Eruption and You
number
Really
2.
Got Me. So, honorable mentions. My honorable mentions are going to be my favorite Hagar Van Halen song and my favorite Dave solo record or song.
Okay.
So Hagar is easy as hell, no question. It's the title track to 5150.
Yeah, it's a
The,
great song.
the title track is the best thing that they ever did with Hagar, easily, by far, not even close. That's the best thing that they ever did. And it's, I mean, you know, I don't think I ever would, but like, I could easily put that as like one of my favorite Van Halen songs of all time, because it's a
Yeah,
great song. I mean,
yeah,
it is. It's easily the best the best song that they did with Hagar. Everything about it's really good. I don't even mind the lyrics. The lyrics aren't, they're not his usual. I
yeah,
mean, his lyrics are pretty terrible for the most part, and it's that one actually transcends his usual You know, like his lyrics a lot of times sound like they came out of like songwriting 101 books or like how to rhyme or like how to rhyme, you
Right.
know, books and shit. But so that my favorite Hagar song is 5150, the title song. And
Yeah.
then for Dave, I had to pick two because these two um are my favorite solo tracks that he ever did, and I kind of like them equally. So the two of them first off of Eat 'Em and Smile
Yep.
is a tune called Big Trouble.
Yep. Good song.
Great song. That's my that I love that song. That I love the whole rap. I love like the
Yep.
story that's being told about Cherry Blue and Mousy Joe. I remember like, you know, I mean, I remember when that came out and I started writing like this is way before I'm writing scripts or anything like that, but I remember writing like a story about two characters named Mousy Joe and his girlfriend Cherry Blue based
Yeah.
off of that song. You know, I just always loved that. And then tied or whatever you want to call it with that off of Skyscraper is the song Hina,
Okay.
which is another really good song. I really love the lyrics. The music's pretty good. The music's you were talking about Prague earlier, like that song kind of has this really I don't know if I'd call it prog, but it sounds kind of experimental and stuff, you
Right.
know. And I think that whole album, Skyscraper, it's okay. I don't know that it holds up that great anymore, but it's definitely an album to listen to with headphones on because I think Dave and Steve Vai are producing that for the first
Yep.
time ever. The two of them, and certainly the first time Dave's ever been at the board. And I think they were probably just effing around half the time. So like that whole album, shit just goes back and forth. They're just like throwing knobs around and
Yeah.
levels. You know, it's really wacky. Some of the songs on that are wacky to listen to with headphones on. So those are my honorable mentions: Hagar, the song 5150, and Dave solo Big Trouble and Hina.
Yeah. So Dave was so smart to get Steve Vai to join the band. That's
And
somebody that
so
you could say
dumb to let them go.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, Steve Vai is like, if you got somebody that compete with Eddie Van Halen, that's a great choice. And like people would say, yeah, Steve Vai is a great. I don't think Steve Vai is like a lot of his. I think he's a great guitar player. I think a lot of his songwriting is not some of
Yeah.
my favorite.
That's what I was just gonna say, is like, he's a great guitar player, but I remember the knock on him back then was that he doesn't write those kinds of songs, you
Yeah,
know? But that was the good thing about having Dave with his sensibilities, but
right,
also originally having Ted Templeman there. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah,
Because
you went over
that's what they bring to the table. Like,
right. It's
okay,
Van Halen, Ted,
Vi comes
Don
up with these
Landry,
guitar riffs, and
right.
then we'll form it into a song, you know? And I mean, I think that was Dave's biggest mistake of you know, of letting that band splinter. He formed a great band, and I
Right.
think he's the kind of guy who needed a band. You know
Yep.
what I mean? He needed those same guys and treat it like it's a band. And I think once that was gone, and it was gone pretty quick, that's why his solo career kind of faltered after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. He had Billy Sheehan too. It was like he's this great kind of tone for a bass player. He
I
sounds
saw
almost like
that
a
show
guitarist.
live. Those guys were effing nuts, man.
Yeah, the drummer's great too. And
Yeah,
yeah, Don Landy stayed with Van Halen. Like in, fair warning, Don Landy was a the engineer, and Ted Templeman went with Dave.
yeah,
So
yeah,
but yeah, Ted Templeman he made those albums too. Like without Templeman, you're not going to have
for
that.
sure. Yeah,
The
for
Van
sure.
Halen first six albums. He was a big part of that. But so as far as my honorable mentions, obviously I've got some of the hits here. Somebody Get Me a Doctor was number 10 for me. I switched it with Romeo Delight. Running with the Devil. I still don't get tired of that song. Hot for Teacher. Love the opening. Alex Van Halen's kind of drums. It sounds like a guitar. It sounds like a car engine playing. Obviously,
There's
Mean Streets.
Hot for Teacher. This is the 12-inch import. Hot for
Yeah, I
Teacher.
remember hearing that when I was younger. That Alex Van Halen's drum intro to that
Hot
just
for Teacher. Yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah.
Yeah, Hot for Teacher.
What was your next one? I interrupted you.
I had Mean Streets.
Oh, Mean Street. Right.
Honorable mention.
Okay. All right.
Atomic Punk. I've always loved that song. That's good. It's not really a deep cut, but it's a great song. And Beautiful Girls. Love that from Van Halen too.
I almost picked that. I almost had that on my list. Beautiful Girls.
Beautiful Girls has probably been played as much as Jump. I think as far as those classic songs. But well, okay, what's your number one?
Number one, the most, probably the one that's everybody's just gonna kind of go like my credibility is gonna be shot now, but I don't care. There's a reason it has to be, and there's a reason it is, and that's Jump.
Jump, okay, Jump's a great
Has
song.
to be. I mean that's the song that made me a fanatic. That is the song. When I heard that song on the radio, and then a few weeks later saw the video, I still love the video. It's still a great video.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, I mean, the minute I heard Jump, it was over for me. No other band. I was a fan of the Who before that, a big fan of the Who. I mean, the minute I heard Jump, who, like it was over. It was it, man. All I wanted to know about was Van Halen from that moment on. And I
That's
still love it. I mean, I get it, it's very poppy and what have you, but I don't listen to it like nonstop, but every now and then I'll have the urge to usually I'll watch the video, you know what I mean? Like I'll be like sitting on the couch and I'll just have the urge scrolling through YouTube and I'll just have the urge to pull up the video, and I just see that band and just I mean again, behind the scenes maybe things weren't so hunky dory, but I mean they look like they're just having the best time in the world, those four guys in that video. And
yeah,
and that's how I want to think of Van Halen. That's how I want to remember Van Halen.
having
Those
fun. Yeah,
four guys like that, just laughing and joking around and looking like they're just making this crap up as they go along, and just whatever, I mean, the famous story, which is I'm sure BS, that was just kind of created probably for the press, was that like that video cost $800 and most of that $800 went towards beer, but that's what it looked. I mean, it's believable because when you watch the video, you're like, I could buy that. You know what I mean? But
yeah. I
it's
even like
just so much
Eddie's
fun, man. I love it.
synthesizer on that. I like the way
Yeah,
it plays.
and
It's
the guitar,
iconic.
even the guitar solo. I mean, it's short, but it's a great guitar solo. But
Man,
yeah,
that's
I
what
mean,
made
I have
Van
to.
Halen huge. And
Yeah, I mean, I have to put that there because, like I said, that is the one that solidified my fanaticism for the band. You just can't. I can't think
it's,
of
it's
anything else
amazing
about
they went from how successful 1984 was, and then Dave leaves the band. The band's so unpredictable. Like
Well, I mean, you can probably make the argument that that's partly why, it went the way it did because,
not so big. Yeah, like
egos,
kind of
yeah,
like the Fleece,
egos.
kind of like
Yeah,
the
I
Fleece.
mean, I mean, I mean, you couldn't turn on the TV in 1984 without seeing Dave, and they none of them wanted to do interviews, so it's like let him do it. He likes to talk,
Yeah,
let him do it. But
right.
it was sort of like, well, that's what that's why it got like a little. That's the way why he became,
The front.
that way. It was
Yeah,
just
he was the guy that talked to the press all, just like Sammy did. The loudmouths that like to love to
yeah.
talk, and people love to interview him, and because Dave always gave great sound bites too. Like he always had some
Oh
great
yeah.
stuff he said.
I mean, I didn't have MTV back then. My stuff would all come from the network stuff. So I'd watch Friday Night Videos. You remember that?
Right.
Friday Night Videos, and he would do like an interview on there, man, and like that was the first time I'm ever hearing him or any of those guys talk. You know what I mean? So
Right.
like before that, you didn't really know, and not that I was paying attention because that's like right when I got into the band. But you'd see those interviews with him, and yeah, and he'd be like, "Oh, they don't wear fur on the 50-yard line at our concerts." All these weird like sayings, and you're just like, "Who is this dude?" Like I'm laughing. I mean, I don't know that it makes sense to me, but I find it funny as hell. You know what I mean? Because it's like, who else was talking that way back then? You know what I mean? He was
Yeah.
he was a character.
I think it was interesting because Eddie Van Halen played on Michael Jackson's "Beat It," played
Yeah,
a solo on that, and I think it was Dave that said 1984 didn't make it. It made it to like number 2 in the Billboard charts, and second to
yeah,
Thriller, which
yeah,
he played on Thriller, and it's part of the reason one of
yeah,
the hugest hits off of that album was Eddie's guitar
yeah.
solo on the song.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, so my number one, it wasn't. It's not the one you had. I got another one too. Uh, for me, it's a
Ain't
song
talking about love.
that "Ain't Talking About Love"
I
is my
knew
number
it.
one.
I knew it.
That's that's a song I never get tired of either. It's like I said, the hits. Some of the hits don't bother me. I didn't like I said, I didn't have Hot for Teacher or Jump in my top 10, but I love those songs. I didn't even include Jump in my honorables, but Jump's a classic song. But it's a song I prefer to listen to it every now and then, kind of in not
Yeah. No, I
always.
mean, I get it. I mean, it's
Yeah,
overplayed, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, it's been played to death. I mean, you can still hear it at sporting events and stuff like that. But
great song.
yeah, I mean, for me, it was more just the what it
Nostalgia.
the impact it had.
Yeah, yeah,
Regardless, like I said, plenty of people plenty of Van Halen fans would probably roll their eyes at the thought of Jump, but it's it's the reason. If I think if then they hear the reason
yeah.
behind why I would say that, then I think they'd be like, oh, okay, I get it, I understand.
Well, whenever I listen to the radio, I don't. If I hear Jump, or if I'm listening to 1984, I don't skip it. It's like I like that, especially with the weird intro of the song 1984, the instrumental
Right.
going to
Yeah, I
that.
mean that was bizarre.
Oh,
I remember putting that out when I got that album and put it on at home. Yeah, hearing that, it was just really yeah, it was weird to hear that.
yeah,
Um,
it kicks over. Yeah, it's like it's a great intro to night to Jump. Even though Jump, I wouldn't call those two songs. You don't want to hear those two songs back to
yeah,
back.
no, not really.
But if
No.
you listen to the album and if you don't skip the first track, when it kicks into Jump, that intro synthesizer part is great. And it just the energy just lights up, and when you hear that, that's Van Halen. They're a
Well,
party.
I think it's also like the 1984 intro. It's also kind of like giving you the heads up, like this ain't,
Get ready.
yeah, this isn't, get ready for maybe a new Van Halen. You know what I mean? Like this isn't your older brother's Van Halen. You know what I mean? It's a new dawn. It's a new era. It's a new time, and it's a
Right.
new year. And so I think that 1984. I mean, if you look at it from that point of view, that song, if you it's kind of like, it's kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? To have something like that just to kind of kick it off. I don't really know. I don't know that I've ever really. I'm sure I've read something about that intro, like why they used it or what the point was, and it might have been something like that. I might just be repeating what I read one of them say, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's weird to have all the synthesizer and the way does that all.
yeah, yeah, it's weird, but
But
yeah, it's cool. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know, man. A great band. I just, I just feel like I don't find myself. There's like, a handful of these songs on my list here that I like hearing every now and then. I have a bunch of it on my phone, and they'll come up randomly, and like you said, like I wouldn't, if one of them just randomly popped up, it's not like I'd skip it or whatever. But I just these days, it's been a long time since I've really had the desire to pull one of their albums off the shelf and pop it in and listen to it through and through, But
maybe you
you
will
know,
now. You say like I got to listen.
maybe, yeah. I mean, I feel like Diver Down, a few years ago, like in the summer, I just kind of was like, I feel like putting this on or whatever, and like I bought like the reissue vinyl that they put out. Like I have all the original ones I bought in the 80s, but I bought like the reissues. I think the train of thought was like I bought by them just to, if I'm going to listen to them, I'll listen to those from now on. I'll just let my original vinyl just sit. I have it in like this case. I
Right.
just all my vinyl for Van Halen. I just like let them sit in that case now. I'll listen to the reissues or whatever.
So you
But
keep all your vinyl in sleeves. You keep them in protective sleeves, or
yeah, I've got well, actually, yeah, all my vinyl I keep in protective sleeves and everything.
that's a good thing
Um,
to do. Man. I don't
but
have
the
a
but the Van
yes.
but the Van Halen stuff, all my Van Halen vinyl. Um, this is like 45s,
Oh,
12 inches, promos. They're all
nice.
in. They're all in this
Right.
case.
Okay. You got it in the vault there, like
Yeah, so I got them
metal.
all just in that. But I've sold a lot of, like, a handful of years ago. I sold a lot of like the bootlegs off because I never listened to the bootlegs. I'm just like,
Right.
I don't need these. I started getting rid of a lot of stuff. I gave away some 12 inches. I had some like Dave promo 12 inches and stuff, and I gave him this dude that I know who collects that kind of stuff. I just like, I don't need this stuff. You know what I mean? I'm not that, I don't care anymore. There's stuff that I have in my Van Halen. Like you know, if we had done this a couple of years ago, I would have busted out my 8 tracks. I had all the 8 tracks,
Yeah.
but I sold them because it was like, what do I need this for? You know what
You
I
don't
mean?
have room for everything. You can't keep everything.
Yeah, you know, and it's just like it's just collecting dust. You know, I mean, a lot of my Van Halen collection I started selling off. That Monsters of Rock tour you were talking about that they did with OU812. I saw that show as well, and I had the T-shirt, but I'd never worn it. It was still
Uh,
brand new and everything.
that one.
That was one of the first things I sold. It had like the ring. It had like, I don't know, some kind of animal or whatever, or a dinosaur on it or something. And I sold that T-shirt for, that was one of the first things I sold. I sold that thing for like a ton of money, a couple of $100. Somebody bought that from me for, and then
Was
I
it
was
a
like,
white one and with
white
the
one, and it had like
Sam no,
it
straight
said
jackets? Yeah.
it had the Van Halen logo, and then it said Monsters of Rock, and I think maybe there was like a dinosaur, like a Godzilla looking thing maybe on it or something.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
maybe
I think it's
the
50.
back I think had like the dates, but
Yeah, I talk about that concert all the time. That was the second time I ever seen him, and it was a free. I was like 14. I was 14 at the time. I turned 15 the following month, and I won a pair of free tickets just to see that concert.
oh
And
really?
I
Ah.
took I actually went to Missouri to pick up my nephew and can't bring him back. And it's like I loved all those bands. I was like, I know you're not necessarily into like the metal and stuff. I liked all the bands. It
I
was
don't
like,
even think when we went and saw that, we saw it at Giant Stadium, and I don't think we saw any of the other bands. I think we got there, yeah, we got there just in time for Van Halen.
yeah, it was a mixed group.
Yeah,
I mean, the Van Halen fans are a little bit older.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was there to see all of them. Like I said, I stayed for the whole show. I mean, it started like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and went all the way
Right.
to like 11, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was Kingdom Come and Metallica and Dokken, Scorpions, and then Van Halen. Like, and I like all kinds of rock music and heavy rock and lighter rock, and I've got a good mix of. I just like basically guitar based kind of music. It doesn't have to be like
Yeah, yeah.
metal necessarily, but I enjoyed the whole day. And like I said, to get a free ticket, a pair of free tickets from the radio,
Hell yeah.
listen on the
And
radio.
it was when you saw him, it was like when we saw him, it was general admission, so we got pretty close to the stage. We were
Mine
at like,
wasn't.
'cause it was at the football stadium, so it was all, the floor was all general admission, so
Wow.
you get as close as you wanted to. So we got pretty close to the stage, and I could swear that this happened, but maybe it didn't. But I could swear that somebody threw like a steak at Sammy Hagar and hit him in the face. I don't know. I have that memory in my head. I could swear that
There
I
was
saw somebody hit him with a steak.
wow. Get that
But
guy out of here. Yeah.
maybe maybe that was wishful thinking.
Well, I saw him at the Hoosier Dome. This is like early July, 1988, and
Mhm.
the Hoosier Dome was where the Indianapolis Colts played at the time and became the RCA Dome, and now that building's been knocked down. Now it's part of the convention center, and they opened up Lucas Oil Stadium down the
Right.
road. It was a big like inflatable dome, like in Minnesota they used to have that dome.
Yeah, yeah,
Minneapolis
yeah, yeah.
inflatable dome,
Mhm.
and the sound wasn't great, but we were like kind of on the left side of the stage, kind of up off the floor. It wasn't general admission.
Oh, okay.
I just know whenever I hear general admission or that kind of seating, I always think of the
Yep.
Who in Cincinnati when people
Yeah,
got
yeah.
trampled and killed because of that's maybe they learned from that because you don't get a ton of general admission shows here.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think like, I mean, I know that was general admission. When I saw the Who in like '89 or whatever, that was general admission.
Wow,
That
you
was
really
a
just
Giant
know.
stadium. Yeah, that was a Giant stadium. But I mean, I think things kind of changed,
Yeah,
you know, in the '80s. I don't think.
I can't imagine that. So somebody falls down and just people just running over them or whatever. I just can't imagine. And, in
Yeah,
Cincinnati, they said they locked a lot of the doors in the
yeah, there
venue.
was like one entrance or something
Yeah,
like that
and
or
they
whatever.
didn't tell the band until after the show that fans had gotten killed before the
Yeah,
concert.
yeah,
Was
yeah.
horrible.
I have a bootleg that I inherited from my brother called, unfortunately, called Stampede
Wow.
from that show. Um,
Well,
but yeah, I mean, I remember that. I mean, I remember that probably because I was a Who fan. You know what I mean? I don't remember it happening, but I remember like in the '80s, sometime hearing about that.
I
Um,
think it happened in the late 70s, what,
yeah, it was. Well,
78?
Keith Moon was dead. He was after Keith Moon had died. It was
Oh,
probably
wow.
70. It was probably '79 or something like that.
Okay, so that was
Yeah,
the Kenny,
yeah. Kenny Jones was
yeah.
on drums. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
Steve, it's been great
yeah.
doing this with you, man. And we're at 90 minutes now. I don't know how long you want to go. We can talk a little bit longer if you like, but
I
I
think we
think
covered it all, man.
yeah, because we had one more
Oh,
comment.
thank you, classic rock junkie, for sticking
Thank
in there for the whole time. I thought he did. Can't see who's watching or if anybody's
yeah,
watching. So
he,
I thought maybe he bailed on us a while ago. I thought for sure he bailed the minute I mentioned jump.
he's all right, buddy.
Yeah,
No, I
he's
mean,
better.
yeah, I mean, a lot of your picks, like I said, we didn't have any duplicates, which is
Yeah, that's surprising. I thought for sure. There were a couple times where you were like holding
yeah.
up women and children first. I was like, he's gonna
There
pick
we go. We're going to talk about
Moron.
the deep cuts and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But
because
no, that's good, man. Yeah, that's good. Surprising, but that's good that we had no overlaps.
yeah, because then you end up, it's funny when we talked about one song and then you well, we were talking about that, so let's go to the next one. So
Yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
got to talk about 20 cuts here from Van
Yeah.
Halen. But yeah, Steve, this is like I
Yeah.
said, this is the first time we ever talked before, other than
Yeah,
Instagram,
man.
just
Nah,
chatting back and forth.
right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you throwing the offer out there. That was fun.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
should do this on the movie channel too. I have a movie channel too, Accessory Movie Reviews, and we should do
Yeah.
that sometime too. Just kind of
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about some
Yeah,
weird
for sure.
movies.
Yeah, for sure, man. Sounds
But yeah,
good.
man, have a great one there, man. We'll certainly talk again. We'll
All right.
chat some more
Yep.
on Instagram. But
All right,
yeah,
man.
have a great one, everybody. Please subscribe to Steve's channel, Steve Herold on YouTube. I'm Excelsior Music Review for the music, and then for movies, Excelsior Movie Review. So, but yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and everybody have a great night. And Steve, you have a great one. We'll
All
talk
right,
to
man.
you. I'm gonna hit in stream and have a great one. Thank you.
Later.